Welcome back guys to round 4 of the US Championship in St. Louis. In this game we have Jeffery Xiong with the white pieces against Ray Robson with black. Jeffery is currently leading the tournament, so he will be looking to extend or at least maintain his lead with the white pieces here against Robson, who was on -1 heading into this game. So without further ado, let's see how this game went. We have e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, the Spanish, knight f6, Robson goes for the Berlin, castles from white, knight takes e4, d4, knight d6, here bishop takes c6 is the main move, which leads to a queen exchange, and a very theoretical position. Instead we see the move d takes e5, knight takes b5, a4, regaining the piece, and d5. So this line is quite promising for black. If Robson manages to safely develop, then he will have long-term advantage in the two bishops. Jeffery played queen to d3, so that prevents bishop f5, which is the most active outpost for the bishop. Robson played g6, reinforcing the idea of bishop f5. We have knight to c3, c6 defending d5, bishop e3, bishop f5, queen d2, and now queen to a5. And this is a good move from black. So queen to a5 pins the knight and sets up a blockade on the queen side. This is in a way preparation for black to castle queen side. So previously bishop g5 was played in a game between Gusyanov and Belot. Black actually won that game. So white tried to prevent black from castling queenside. Black went on to play bishop g7, he castled, and then he played f6 to try and open up the position for his bishop pair. White tried to hang on to e5, but that eventually became a big liability. So in this game we see the move rook f to e1. This is now a new position, but this new move might not be a better alternative, because after Robson castled, how exactly does white deal with the threat of d4? For example, if white tries bishop g5, bishop b4 is a strong reply. After bishop takes d8, rook takes d8, there's no stopping d4. If queen d4, c5, queen d1, d4, takes, queen takes, rook takes e1, bishop takes e4, rook takes e4. Material is even in this position, but it feels like black's queenside pawns are much quicker compared to white's kingside pawns. The black king also has very quick access to the e6 square, which is a very useful square since it defends this pawn and also attacks e5. So bishop g5 can be met with bishop b4. Well, d4 doesn't quite win material because white has this knight to e4 resource. It does allow the queens to be traded, and the end result is a very comfortable endgame for black. Jeffery took some drastic measures. He played the move e6, giving up a pawn and opening some diagonals for his bishop. Black can push d4, but Jeffery was probably intending to play queen takes, and now forcing the move f6, because if rook g8, pawn takes f7 wins the rook. So f6, bishop takes, rook g8, e7, winning the bishop. So white has a rook and a minor piece for the queen, and his pieces are quite active. This might still be playable, although better for black. Let's go back to the main position. So after e6, Robson played bishop captures pawn. F takes e6 is also a good move, creating a massive pawn center. But we have bishop takes e6, bishop g5. If black plays the idea we discussed a while back, which was bishop to b4 and give up the exchange, The difference here is that the pawn is no longer on e5. So if c5, white can meet that with queen f6. And after d4, white stabilizes his position by giving back the exchange. And white is fine here. So after bishop g5, we have rook to d7. Rook to e8 was also possible, but Jeffery played rook to d7, just wanting to keep this idea of d4 alive. We have the move bishop to f6, attacking the rook, rook g8, and now queen e3 stepping out of this pin. The next few moves come naturally for black. Bishop b4, rook e to d1, bishop f5 attacking c2. This is a difficult position for white. Black's king is actually pretty safe on the queen side due to white's inability to advance the queenside pawns. If white plays a slow move, for example, if rook over to c1 just to demonstrate, then black will play rook d6 and he is preparing to take control of the e-file with rook e6. And now the other rook is coming to double on the e-file, and this is pretty good for black. So after bishop f5, Jeffery plays another drastic move, knight to b5. So this can actually be taken. It does look like the dark squares around the king are pretty weak. But in this case, black has a dark square bishop, so it's not really an issue. After king to c7, white lacks the firepower to continue the attack, and black has plenty of defensive resources around his king. However, the move bishop c5, forking queen and rook, does lose the game to rook a8 check. After king c7, white's queen and rook are attacked, but queen to e5 is a nice intermezzo. Bishop d6, queen c3 check, queen c6, and rook takes g8. White is up a clean exchange. Robson, for some reason, chose not to capture the knight. Instead, he played bishop takes c2. And with this move, Jeffery is back in the game. We have rook d to c1. Bishop d2 doesn't quite work tactically because of knight takes a7. King b8, knight takes c6. Queen e5 check. And rook takes c2. White is slightly better. So Robson retreated the bishop. Now it's not so clear because white has control of the c-file. We have knight takes a7, king b8, knight to b5. This knight can't be taken because that opens up the a-file, and if queen takes b5, queen a7 is mate. Bishop d2 again doesn't quite work as well because white can go queen d4, and if the rook is taken, b4 gives white a good initiative. After queen a6, bishop e5 check. Rook takes c1, these pawns are getting dangerously close. White is also threatening to win back the exchange with knight c7 check. And this knight is immune, as capturing would only open up the a-file. So this is a pretty promising position for white. So here we have king to a8. Jeffery plays bishop to c3, trying to remove one of the blockading pieces. Bishop captures, b takes, and now Robson plays the move bishop e6, preparing to challenge the e-file by first blocking the queen's control of e7 and e8. Jeffery played rook to e1, we have rook to e8, h3 solving the background issues, h5, king h2, rook d to e7 doubling on the e-file, queen c5 getting out of the rook's line and also preventing black from immediately taking control of the e-file with bishop c8, as the rook on e7 will then be attacked twice by the queen and rook. So the game continued, king to b8, renewing the threat of capturing the knight as the rook will no longer pin the queen to the king. We have queen d6 check by Jeffery, king c8. Although the queen and knight are very close to the black king, white doesn't have ample resources to continue the attack, and the black queen also does a great job of blockading and controlling some key squares. So the best move for white was actually to go king g1, admitting that it's difficult to make further progress. So if rook d7 attacking the queen, white goes queen f4 and this knight is still immune, because after captures, queen takes b5 because the queen controls this diagonal, rook a8 is mate. So king g1 was the best move. But Jeffery played queen to c5. This threatens knight a7 check, but it puts the knight in a very awkward pin. So Robson continued with king d8. This is in fact the best move, just stepping out of the check. Jeffery then commits another error. He plays the move g3. So instead of g3, c4 would have offered more resistance. After pawn takes knight, c takes d5, queen c7 check, exchanging queens. If bishop d7, rook takes e7, rook takes e7, d6 is very strong, creating mating threats around the king. If rook e1, rook takes, queen c7 check, and queen b8 leads to mate. So if instead of rook e1, let's say rook e6, then there's the idea of taking on b5, followed by queen c7, and again queen b8, leading to mate. So here queen c7 is the best move, exchanging the queens. And this leads to an ending where white would be down a pawn, but he can try to hold this position. Instead, we have the move g3 from Jeffery, accepting the loss of the knight and trying to prevent a check on this diagonal. So we have pawn takes knight, a takes b5. So Robson goes queen c7 anyway to try and exchange queens, and black is pretty solid, having plenty of defensive pieces around his king. Let's see how Robson converted his material advantage. Queen d4 from Jeffery, king d7, rook a4, rook c8, attacking c3. c4, we have queen c5, pawn takes. So here if queen takes d4, there's the in-between move, pawn takes e6, and white is back in the game. So we see the move bishop f5, rook takes e7, king takes e7, queen e5 check, king d7, rook f4, desperately hoping for some play against f7 with the move g4. But here Robson plays queen d6, offering a queen exchange. We have queen takes d6, king takes d6. Black is now completely winning in this position. g4, king e5, attacking the rook. After rook f3, pawn takes, h takes, bishop takes g4, rook takes f7, rook b8, defending the pawn on b7. And in this position, Jeffery Xiong resigned. Very solid play from Ray Robson. He missed the early chance to just capture the knight, but he did get the job done in the end. After this loss, Jeffery still leads the event, tied with 3 other players. They are Wesley So, Linear Dominguez, and Hikaru Nakamura, all tied on 2.5 out of 4. That is all for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.